Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to Under the Spotlight. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to make sure that you don't miss a future episode. We are at episode 1 of this new series and we are going to be kicking things off in style because we have received a performance video from none other than Buck Dharma from Blue Oyster Cult. Blue Oyster Cult are one of the biggest rock bands of all time, having sold in excess of 25 million albums worldwide. They released their new album, The Symbol Remains, late last year, and you can find myself talking with Buck about that album on the channel here somewhere if you want to check that out independently. They're currently on tour in the USA and will be back in the UK in October, touring with Deep Purple. If you're in the UK or Europe or the USA, check out their website for tour dates as they'll be coming to a town near you very soon. So without further ado, let's see what Buck has in store for us as he goes under the spotlight. And there we have it. First of all, let me just say how amazing it is to be able to look at Buck Dharma at such close quarters, playing such a unique solo over the Under the Spotlight backing. By the way, every single guitarist that is going to be featured on this series is going to be playing over the same backing, so we can see how they differ with style and the choices that they make and their technique, all these different things. But we can learn so much from a guy like Buck. As the guitar magically appears, the first port of call is tone, and we've got a wet tone here with a little bit of that distortion, delay on there as well, a really smooth sounding tone. And Buck has let me know that he's obviously using his headless Strat style Kiesel guitar here, but also he's going through an Axe FX3, which is an effects processor that's an amp modeler. So very similar to the Kemper, if you've seen that. I used to have an old Pod XT that was an amp modeler, so you can choose whatever amp you want and which year. But anyway, he chose a Mesa MK2C, and that was through a 1x12 cab. And alongside that, he had a small amount of Tube Screamer, and that was blended in parallel before the amp, and then a ducking delay, which followed the cab. So that's the setup that Buck's got in order to get this tone. I've just run through my Line 6 HD 150 with a similar kind of thing, but I'm just using the inbuilt distortion, so I haven't got exactly the same setup as Buck, but hopefully it's going to be around the same kind of ballpark tone-wise. An important thing to mention about the effects on show here is that they're being used to embellish the sound, and that's all you ever want to use effects for. You want to make sure that your technique is faultless on the fretboard, so then you can take that playing, which already sounds good, to another place. And a lot of people do fall into the trap of relying on a particular effect to hide their inadequacies on the fretboard. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to have total freedom to play, as Buck does here. So let's start learning and diving into Buck's solo. So straight off the bat, Listen for the way that Buck throws these lines together, but the dynamics, the way that he's not playing all at one level. So when he goes into the beginning part of the song, by the way, we're in C here. When we move up, we have this, and just to give an example of the dynamics that are in there, Buck isn't going like this, going... And as soon as I do that, I think a lot of people will think that that sounds like a beginner or somebody who's just started learning to play lead. And it probably does, because as you advance, or as you get an appreciation of dynamics, you can really start to put it into your playing. We're just going to have a quick listen so that I can point out a couple of things. Right at the end there, we have this. And these notes that come in before that D at the end are so subtle, but that's what dynamic playing's all about. To just bring you in a little bit closer and then hit you with a slightly louder note is always going to keep it interesting. But just from a technique perspective, you'll see the way that when Buck starts, the little finger comes over, and this is going to be on the 8th fret of your B string. And he's now got his second finger in that 6th fret position. So that's where he plays that hammer on. And now he's in position with that first finger for then the slide. So the important thing to point out here is that Buck is one of those players that you can tell he plays with feel, and we know that he's got that lead vocal ability on stage and songwriting, producing, you name it. Buck can do it, but having the ability to sing and sing through the guitar is a great way to approach playing lead guitar if you can sing. But if you can hear the notes in your head, that's a great start. But you can tell that Buck, he feels his way around the guitar, and the reason that he can do that is because he's organized with his left hand. And this opening phrase is a great example of it, because if he was in the wrong place, he wouldn't be able to play what he's thinking. You always want to have your technique to a point where whatever the line is that you can think of in your head, or that you're singing in your head, you can play it through that fretboard or on that fretboard without having any stumbling blocks of, oh, my finger's not going to be able to reach the note that I want to hit. So it's very important to keep your fingers organized in exactly the same way that Buck is doing here, because when he's playing through that, if he shifted up with that 3rd finger, he's now going to have to shift back down with his 1st finger, whereas with the little finger, he's now got that 1 finger per fret, which is something that when I'm teaching, I always tell people about, so that when you're organized, you've got your notes from the major scale there, but you don't have to move to get them when you've got your hand organized. Of course, Buck is going to be moving around. We're not just playing a straight up and down major scale here. We are going to be jumping up and down the fretboard, but it's always organized, which is the most important thing to think about and to implement with that left hand. It's also interesting in that on the backing track, we have a little bit of piano that is playing a little melody, and Buck has tuned into that, and he's playing a variation of that piano melody on the guitar, but just extemporizing around the melody that he can hear in that backing. So it's now making what he's playing relevant to the backing track. And sometimes you will see players that just go off on one and don't have any relevance to what's going on in the background. Sometimes they haven't even got relevance to the band that they're playing in with the other bandmates. But here we've got that relationship between that lead guitar having a nod towards that backing, the piano that you can hear. So let's jump into the next phrase. And there we have it. So a little bit more open dynamically here, but we start with this bend. Like that. And just a quick word on that last bend. I love the way that Buck just allows it to descend like that, rather than just playing it straight and just stopping it there. It's almost like the note or the guitar is breathing out at the end, going, and you just hear it descend. It's so cool. Tiny little details, but these all count to putting something different in there to give it a little bit more expression. And you can see how also we have this. Buck is just slightly behind. He's not staying on the beat here because that starts to sound wooden. If I was going just try playing it, I know it sounds stupid, but playing it on the beat all the time, following it, you want to make sure that your playing is smooth and flows, because that is always going to sound interesting, never knowing where the guitarist and the instrument is going to go. If you're playing along with the timing the same throughout your performance, people are going to be able to predict what the time is going to be for the rest of your performance. You want to hit them with different flows, different feels, different grooves, and that's exactly what we're getting here. Let's get back into it. I'm just going to jump in here because we had that little run that came in after that bend. And then we had. So we've really got variations on a theme here, really cool runs, by the way, and we've got the same melodic approach where everything's related. So in the beginning part of the solo, we had very similar lines that were slightly changed. So for example, going like that, and we've got which then leads us into, and then, and that A that we're playing at the end, that is creating a relationship between the two runs. Even though the two runs, they're both descending, they're playing very similar notes, but they are ending on that same note, so it means that the sentence is being extended. It's not being resolved until we get this, but then we still don't resolve at the end. So it's really cool because even now, we still haven't really had a full stop, which means that you're waiting to hear what comes next to get the end of your sentence. But by throwing in that A, it just ties these two runs together. It's really cool. It's going to make the solo flow, but always sound relevant to itself because it is the guitar having a conversation. It's telling you something. It's telling you a story and taking you on a journey. So piecing things together like this, the top players, when they play a guitar solo, it is like a mini composition within the composition of the song. The solo is standalone and you will go on a journey within that solo, as we will see here, because we've started around 5th fret, 7th fret. But when we get into the second half of the solo, look out for the way that Buck is now going to ascend even higher, because now we're just going somewhere else with the journey, and dynamically we're climbing up that mountain to reach that crescendo, and we're doing that musically as well. We're literally climbing in pitch so that the notes are getting higher and higher. Another thing I'm going to recommend to you, just to listen to this solo without looking at the video, because then you just get to hear all those tiny details. Sometimes when you're looking at somebody play, you miss out on a little bit of the detail that your ears are picking up because you're taking in too much visual information. So it's definitely worth just listening to this without any visuals, and you'll get such a deep appreciation of that journey that Buck takes us on. But let's get back into it. here we go. We are climbing higher up. And when we get into that, we've got some slight change in expression there. So we've got this, and it's almost like having a couple of ghost notes in there that, and there's a little bit of a change in groove. So again, just mixing it up, not playing on the beats, playing off the beat, throwing in something different, that groove. But let's jump back into it. And there we have it. Just look out for the vibrato as well, a technique that I haven't mentioned yet, but Buck is just putting it in there sometimes, and sometimes he's just playing a note straight. So he's even mixing up that side of things. But when we go here, that kind of thing. Again, really cool runs here and so melodic, which is just about to set us up for a little run that we've got being thrown together here. But again, listen to the relevance between the two runs we're about to hear. And there we have it. When you're talking about melody, that is what it's all about. So we're just going to have a little listen to this run that Buck throws in. Okay, so we've got this. Like that again, really melodic stuff going on here. And we've got this little rake across the strings for our, like that, which is going to make this first note a little bit more dramatic rather than going straight to it, to have that little roll over before we hit it. Which is that second part of that run. And then you could hear it there again, just coming in. And there we are. So we're at the end of the solo, obviously, but the way that we've finished off here, again, we've got these runs that are related. So by the time that we've got to the... Again, just holding on notes to signify that we're ending the solo here, and we've got this little run across, and again, we're not playing and holding down the strings to get that sound where all of the strings and the notes are ringing out over the top of each other like a chord. You want to get that, how Buck's playing it here, really concise, and you might want to kind of roll your first finger over in order to keep those clean, but really understated finish as well, descending with that backing track as it fades out. It sounds like right at the end there where we have our... There's that kind of thing, just a hint of a harmonic there on that B string, really subtle before we then descend, a little bit of vibrato, backing track fades out, and that is the solo done and dusted. So what can you take away from looking at a guy like Buck's, a player of his caliber? There is so much. I mean, we could analyze this for years, but just navigating your fretboard with a solo, building that journey into your solo, ascending pitch-wise, but also ascending dynamically, so that by the time you get to the end of your solo, you've had a crescendo. Here, we've had our crescendo, and then we just fade out and descend with that backing track, fitting the mood and matching the mood of that backing track. But the other thing to take away is Keeping your fingers organized, really important if you want to start singing through your guitar to express yourself and get these notes that you've got in your head through your hand onto that fretboard and out of the amp. You've got to have your fingers organized and your whole hand organized so that you can access these notes as soon as you think of them. The other thing that we have in this performance, and you can start to build into your own playing, are these really effective delayed hammer-ons that we have when we go that kind of thing, and just picking before a slide. Make the audience wait to hear where you're going rather than just giving them the answers all the time. And vibrato is a huge one. I always mention it in my videos about the one technique that is really going to improve the sound of your playing no end. And when you're... You can even let that string ring out for a little while and vibrato it a little bit. Buck really mixes it up here by playing with vibrato but then playing notes straight. So he's always keeping you guessing. And finally, just on that point of keeping your audience guessing, don't be a slave to the tempo, or should I say, don't be a slave to the click track. If you're in the studio, just play almost with a disregard of the timing and then just dip into the timing again and then come out of it. That's exactly what Buck's doing here. He's not hitting points. He's not hitting accents and beats like each beat of the bar. He's not hitting those straight on. He's delaying. He's playing around those beats. And that will give such a flow to your playing, but it will make it interesting. It will be unpredictable. And it's going to be even better when you do then get back into playing with the beat and in time with the runs that you throw in there. It's going to make them sound more interesting because they are different, because you haven't been playing in time, but then you play in time and just mix and match it. And we're really fortunate here that we get to see one of the best in the business just laying it down in front of us so clearly, so we can take away so much from how to improve our own playing and how to just piece together an interesting journey in your solo. But a huge thank you to Buck for sending this along and playing this solo for us so that we can see his playing up close and personal and under the spotlight. If you want to check out blueoystercult.com or Buck's YouTube channel, I'm going to put all the links in the description below, as well as a link to the latest album, The Symbol Remains. You can check that out as well. It'll all be in that description below. But thank you guys so much for joining me on the first episode of Under the Spotlight. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And we will be doing more of these in the future, so make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss one. But there will always be one on the first Sunday of every month. It just so happens there might be a few more because of the amount of guitarists that we've got lined up to look at. So again, thank you, Buck, for playing this solo for us tonight. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock.